Jazz led the LA Clippers by 25, playing one of their best halves of basketball, and they lost. A story that is stunningly similar to Game 6 of last year's playoffs. We're talking about it on POSTCAST. David Locke, along with Ron Boone, as the Utah Jazz wrap up their 6-game road trip with a heart-wrenching loss to the LA Clippers, one that, quite honestly, it's hard to believe is not going to rip open these painful scars of last year's playoff loss. And the way you rip off a scar, unfortunately, you bleed more than you did the first time. And I think that is a ugly analogy that's gross, but it's unfortunately very true. And as we sit here at this moment, a bit shell-shocked to have seen this again, it is hard to like imagine how this team like deals with this, because this has got to feel like, and I don't want to over dramatize, but it's got to feel like they've played 75 games of an NBA season working to try to overcome what happened to them last year in Game 6. And it literally just happened exactly the same way by exactly the same score again.
Yeah. That's going to be probably hurt more now than it did. I mean, you're trying to recover from last year. Then you get the same thing that happens this year as it did last year, and it's duplicating itself to the point where the Jazz players, I think, especially the ones that were here that were a part of that, definitely feeling the pain. Some turnovers, and then I thought one of the key things there in that fourth quarter, David, was trade. There was a stretch there where we traded 2s for 3s, and they just nipped away and got to the point where they were in striking distance. Jazz could not put that fire out.
The Jazz led this game by the score of 76-51 with 8:07 left, but very similar. I mean, like, I can't explain to you, I don't want to bore you with it, but like, it's the exact same. If you go back to a year ago, we're up 25 in June by almost the same score, 75-50 instead of 76-51. Both times they make a run, we take it back up to 18 or 19, and then they go. The Jazz got it to 19, but then we're outscored 48-23 over the final 13 minutes. The Jazz allowed 48 points, Ron, in the final, I think, 13 minutes of this game tonight.
This is what is bothering me. Jazz used 65% in the first quarter, 58% in the second quarter, 54%, well, 56% in the third quarter, and 55% in the fourth quarter. And they still lose the ball game. Take that field goal percentage every time, and normally you would win the ball game. Unfortunately, the defense just didn't hold up the offense here tonight.
And the defense hasn't held up all year in the clutch.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where the Jazz got exposed last year in the playoffs, and have never really come up with an answer to it, unfortunately. The final number, by the way, it looks as though the Clippers scored, I might have misspoke, 121. I used the 131 of last year's score. So the Clippers, I believe, scored, there was 92-75. 92. No, I got it right. It was 90-70, and they scored 51 points in the final 13 minutes and 28 seconds. 51, not 41. My math was, no. Yeah. Wow. How do you give up 50 points in 13 minutes?
Well, that's a puzzling thing, and I'm sure you look back at that ball game when you're going over the play-by-play there, you'll see that I thought those 3s for 2s, those 2s for 3s was a big problem, especially because the Jazz was scoring, but they were coming down and they were getting some 3-point shots. The Jazz didn't get a 3-point shot in that fourth quarter. 0 for 3, they ended up 5 for 12 in the fourth quarter. So that's, to me, was one of those deals where they were, just nipping away at it, and then they ended up getting 15 field goals for the most part. The Jazz 9 field goals in that fourth quarter, and that's it.
Ron, PK says, "Hold me, Ron."
Okay.
The Jazz fan needs consoling.
Yeah, this one does hurt. This one definitely does hurt.
I think this is.
So do we go back now and make an excuse about those free throws, the number of free throws that was missing?
Right. I mean, there's the Jazz missed a ton of free throws that they regret. They went 12. They are 17 of 29 by the end of the night. So that's 4 or 5 points.
Yeah.
It is worth noting, we talked about early in the game that the Clippers had played just twice since we played them in Los Angeles, in Salt Lake, and we have traveled the country. I think we ran out of gas. The Trent Forrest injury means that guys had to play more than they usually do. But, there's a great moment, like they were up 25.
Correct.
Like Boyan, had a great line about something. Somebody asked him about the playoffs last year. He's like, we were up 25. And I just think, that's it. And you can go find an individual play. You can go find 5 free throws. You can go find fatigue, which certainly was part of it. We've been out here for a long time. But it just, the Clippers know how to score against us, and we don't have the answer.
Yeah. And I was very happy and pleased with, because I thought at the beginning of the ball game that they were going to stay with that defense that they were throwing at the Jazz, and Jazz got them out of it for the most part, but not totally out of it. But I thought eventually that defense was going to win out. The Jazz didn't let it win out. They ended up scoring. They put up 115 points in this ball game and scored well. The defense, David, as you mentioned, is just letting the Jazz down right now.
One of the comments on the question is is this going to break their will? I don't know, but I don't think that's an illegitimate thought. I guess would be the only thing I would say. I don't want to. There's a great line in the NBA that's never as bad as it seems. It's never as good as it seems. And let's hope that's true. I think that's a legitimate question. To me, it's a legitimate question of a team's now lost 5 in a row. And to experience the exact same crushing loss that Quinn Snyder said was a loss that, it was painful and they felt all season long, off season long, and to re-experience, they have to be looking at each other and wondering what they can and can't do.
Well, in games like this, believe me, as an ex-player, you start reliving the game throughout the ball game, and you start looking at your team and what we didn't do, and then you look at yourself, or vice versa. A lot of times, some of the star players like Donovan and Paul George and those guys, they look at themselves first because they figure that they should be the ones that help this team, help their team anyway, win games. And so they will be looking at, and believe me, there'll be a lot of film watching there as well, because this has happened a couple of times with the Clippers. Every team is going to try to defend the Jazz the way they defended. I thought the Jazz handled it very, very well. But how do you defend a team? Well, David, they just got hot, and the Jazz didn't have an answer. But the thing is now, can they get healthy? Got the Lakers at home, Golden State, and then they run off 3 home games with Memphis, Oklahoma City, and Phoenix. So you got to finish this season out strong.
Try to avoid the 7th seed at this point is really the only thing. That's the issue. They've got to find a way to avoid the 7th seed at this point. Yeah. And the funky thing is you avoid the 7th seed. I actually think you get 6. You get Denver in the first round. We've beat Denver all 4 matchups. I don't know if we can do it again in the playoffs, but Jamal Murray hasn't come back yet. Maybe he does in the next few games, but it seems getting late. Denver, strangely, we've played well against. And then, frankly, I think there's a chance you face this Clipper team in the second round that they could beat Minnesota in the play-in, and then they could beat Memphis in the first round if they have Paul George back, and particularly if they get Kawhi back. So, who knows? But
let me add one other thing there. The Jazz had great success, and maybe you can look at this and think about it. How much success they had when Zubac was on the floor for the most part. Hartenstein was the one that
Zubac was minus 21 in 17 minutes. Yeah. Same thing he was in the playoffs, and Ty Lue pulled him. I mean, we haven't gotten into the X's and O's of this. It's the exact same script, except for Hartenstein played the center instead of Batum. Mm-hmm. But Hargenstein scored over Gobert a bunch of times in the lane in a way that was a little surprising.
Yeah.
And
So,
but yeah, it's the same thing. They pulled their center. They went 5 wide. They drove at us. They didn't run a lot of pick and roll, and they got us.
yeah. Hargenstein ended up, what, 14 points?
Yep. You know, maybe Bogey, maybe Daniel House makes a difference. Trent Forrest, I don't know when we're going to see him again. That did not look good, and he had a serious concussion already this year. So, all right. We don't have a lot for you guys. I think we're a little shell-shocked too. We're here because, we appreciate you and appreciate your fandom and chatting with you. I wish we had a better story to tell, but this one was a little stunning, I think, to all of us.
Very much so. And
tomorrow
get home.
Tomorrow is the 11th anniversary of the podcast Locked on Jazz, which started as tip-off, and I'll try to come up with something for you. See you.